question is, I've been meeting with my ecclesiastical leader, and he's kind of just been saying, like, why do you want to know everything that's going on with your husband? Why do you want to know about his triggers and slips? I've never heard of women wanting to know that before. And I know that the benefit, I'm aware of the benefits for the addict to report those slips and triggers and things, but what is the benefit for me? Because I do feel like it is beneficial, but I can't word it.
So I think you have to trust your own instincts. So if it feels beneficial, then even if you can't explain why, you don't have to be able to say, well, here's my 12 reasons of why it's beneficial. And to me, that's an ecclesiastical leader that probably hasn't worked with enough couples before if he's never heard of someone wanting to know. Because the unknown is the scariest thing in the world, right? So the only thing I would mention is that you've got to kind of modulate your own trauma with it and say, this is what I need to know so that I'm aware of what's going on and what my part is and what my part isn't. But sometimes I've seen some women who will ask they want to know everything, every detail, every ounce of everything, because the unknown is too scary. And to me, sometimes that creates trauma stories in your head. So I think you kind of have to trust your own instincts and say, to this point, I feel like he's being accountable, he's being honest, he's being open, because I don't know if he's in recovery unless he's talking to me a lot, right? So I'll trust that. But then there's a certain level of detail that is going to push me into a place where I'm comparing and panicking. So I think if you have women, all women I know have really good instincts. Trust your instincts and go with that. And then that's an opportunity to educate the church leader that you're working with to say, here's why this is helpful for future people.
Okay. Next question will be a paper question that Geoff Steurer answers. This one has my name on it, so I'm going to read it. All right, this one says, Geoff, you mentioned that you should read your inventory to your spouse. What if you do not have a spouse or significant other yet? Should you keep your inventory and share it with them when you do? So I think there's two questions there. The first one is who do you share it with if you don't have a spouse? If you're in a group, you share it with your group. If you're working with a church leader, you share it with them or a family member. Somebody who's trustworthy, has good boundaries. You need to have the experience of sharing that, of saying it. You've got to be able to face your own story without shame, to be able to own it, talk about it, and experience it, and have the experience of being seen and held by someone else in your truth. So that's an experience that other witness can provide. Now, if you're dating someone or you eventually get engaged or married, I do recommend that you tell your story. You need to go into every single detail that's in the disclosure. You might work with a counselor or with somebody who knows you and kind of work through that, but at a minimum, your partner does deserve to know your story and understand where you've come from. And if you're really in good long-term recovery, you won't be ashamed of telling your story. You'll understand that those experiences have made you who you are today, and that you're still actively honest and open and willing to continue working on this and pulling it into that experience and that process with you. It's not something that you're going to feel ashamed of or want to hide or pretend or become shiny and pretend that you've never struggled. And you might be surprised when you become real and vulnerable and open and honest, they might start opening up about some of their struggles. It really invites a culture of vulnerability, which is great for marriage. Thank you. Another audience question if someone would like. Okay, right here in the front.
Throughout this whole conference, I feel like we've talked a lot about connections and relationships and community. How do you create that in your family when you don't necessarily feel safe with, say, parents or siblings? If you want to have that connection, if you want them to understand you and be there to help you, how do you do that when you don't quite know how?
Okay, so the first way to create that emotional connection and safety is with yourself. And that can happen in two ways. Were you at Geoff Steurer's earlier presentation? This Geoff? No? Okay. So in that presentation, a woman shared her story, and two of the things that she did to kind of develop that emotional connection was, number one, she journal wrote, and not a diary. A diary is a sequence of events, but learning to write how you feel and not worry about who sees it, but being able to put it out exactly, unfiltered, how you feel.
And second, spiritual connection to a higher power. And so that's the first step. Developing that emotional maturity and safety with yourself. And then, obviously with your spouse, learning to do that. If you need help with that, working with a couples therapist or a group to do that. Sometimes a lot of people ideally would love to be able to have that with their family of origin. What I've experienced over the years of working with many couples in this process is sometimes that's an important quest to take. You got to take care of first things first, your marriage first, and oftentimes it's going to be a recovery community that you're connecting with. And some family relationships are not going to change in this life in that way because you're in a process that they're not in. And so some of those expectations may seem so foreign to them, it may actually diminish the relationship a little bit. Some are vibrant enough to be able to do that, and that's wonderful. So it's just you kind of have to try it and see as you go along. Some people are really open, and some people are not. And the main thing is you've got to find people that you are safe with. So thank you for the question. Okay, another audience question? Okay, right here in the back, right?
My name's Brian, so I thought you were reading my mind there for a second. It's like to know. Anyway, two questions, if that's okay. One, most common errors made by ecclesiastical leaders when dealing with this, maybe that we could watch out for. Second, the best way to be proactive in addressing pornography kind of on the general level, how to kind of help the congregation before it becomes, the 0 hour for many couples.
Okay, Geoff, I'm going to let you answer that. Geoff Steurer was an actual, he used to serve as a bishop. And so, Geoff, I'm going to have you answer that question, please.
Thanks. I think the biggest mistake church leaders make is minimizing the problem. And I think Elder Holland addressed it, like kind of the hey, I like you as a person, so this really couldn't be happening. And that can happen directly to the individual. The thing with being a minister or a church leader or bishop is that you're so close to your congregation. They're your neighbors, they're your friends. And so when they come to you in this confidence, they're oftentimes, broken down or they're feeling so bad that you just want to hug them and say, if you're a good person, don't worry about it. But that minimizes the seriousness of the issue. And so it's really about being able to take this stance of, I love you, I care about you, you're important to me, you're my neighbor, you're my friend, and I thank you for coming to me and talking about this terrible issue. And we have to make sure the Band-Aid fits the wound. And if you're bringing in a big old wound, I'm not going to just dismiss this and write it off as you're a good person and so on, because that's also very shaming and dismissive to the wife. Most women report to me they are not believed by their bishops about the stuff that's really going on behind closed doors. The verbal abuse, the sexual demands, some of the stuff that goes on that's just really unspeakable in many cases. These women are taking tremendous risks in coming in. And so the best thing a church leader can do, the first thing is to take it seriously. That's huge. So there's a whole bunch more, but I would say that in getting educated or not being educated is probably the second one. They need to be educated, so you got to be reading books and understanding. Sure. Well, if that happens, then you just continue to minister and support her, because you're still her spiritual leader as well, and she's had the courage to come in and face this. And she can get help and heal whether or not he wants to. And her healing may involve leaving him or setting big boundaries if he's going to stay stuck. And that may be a process that has to evolve. But it's amazing what starts to happen when one person takes initiative and starts healing. Don't dismiss her waiting for him. She's right there in front of you. Work with her. And eventually he might start to come in. But maybe he won't. There's another part to your question. Do you want to take that?
No, we're going to move on to the next question. If you have other ones, please visit with Geoff. We're going to go to a paper question with Adam Moore.
All right, I'd rather hold this. So I'll try to answer this as briefly as possible. So many resources are available for help. what are the sort of the bare necessities of recovery? So if you want to get really, really focused in, I'll tell people there's really two of the most important issues in recovery are going to be accountability and connection. That's the key issue. My preference, even my clients, so I'll see people in therapy, but everybody has to go to a group setting of some sort or another. They've got to go to 12-step, they need to find a group, because they need to be able, it's not, sitting with me for an hour a week is not going to cure all of their problems. I'd love for that to be the case, but I'm not that powerful. So you need to be able to sit with a group of people who understand your situation, who know what's going on, because they're living it right now, and then find mentors within that group, people who are a little bit further down the road, who can walk you through daily accountability every single day, not just for whether or not you acted out, but what are you doing proactively in recovery to be a healthy, connected, honest person with integrity. So that, and the other piece is the human connection. And if people have been involved with pornography for a long time, they don't really know how to do human connection very well. It's kind of a mystery, because pornography is really safe because it's never going to reject you. And so whether that happens, some of that's going to happen in a group setting because you're going to bond with other people. Some of it's going to happen in counseling. You're going to learn to do certain techniques about learning how to be vulnerable and connect. And hopefully some of that, for a married person, for example, is going to happen in a home setting. And I always tell, I work with women, and we all work with women addicts and men addicts, but from a perspective of for guys who are in addiction, I say pay close attention to your wife. Because when she shares some needs with you, jump on it. Do whatever she's asking you to do. In the vast majority of cases, she's saying, hey, this will help me trust you and feel safer with you. Just do it in 99% of cases, and she'll teach you how to bond, and that will make a big difference. Do those two, and there's lots of other stuff, but I would start with that.
Thank you. Okay, audience question, please. Okay, back in the back with the white shirt on. See, I'm not psychic, Brian.
George.
It's amazing. My shirt is actually white, but probably some yellow in there too. So I kind of speak for maybe a minority here. I notice that most are married couples, and they're kind of working on that, probably out of necessity. But I'm a single guy who's been married 27, and I know I speak for people with, children of addicts and future addicts. Is there anything you would suggest specifically, other than the 12 steps in a group and a sponsor, or in the literature, that you would suggest to help somebody that doesn't have the life or death situation in regard to relationships?
Well, I'm glad you're here for yourself. Not, a lot of times guys that are working recovery as an individual, like you said, don't have the motivation necessarily built in and losing a relationship or whatever. So I'm just glad you're here. And so, guys that are, and I'm just going to speak for the men I work with that are single, there's great power in them learning how to be relational. Like, good recovery is about connection, and so you're actually practicing to live in relationships. And so the addiction is a counterfeit relationship. The fantasy, the acting out, all of it is really turning toward a counterfeit comfort. And so learning to turn to people to receive connection, validation, comfort, support, encouragement. You can practice all of that with lots of different people, and you can learn how to trust, you can learn how to be trusting, you can do all those things. Think of it as a dress rehearsal for a marriage and a family. And good recovery is going to include all of that. So the tasks are the same. We have single guys that join our men's groups where they have where they're mostly married guys, and they learn from these other men how to connect. It's a classroom for connection. And so you do need that social engagement and that chance to reach out, to be vulnerable, to open up. Those are all the building blocks of good marriages. So, and that actually is a very big protection against addiction, against relapse down the road.
All right, thank you. We're going to do a paper question. Adam Moore is going to answer a question in regards to healthy sexuality.
All right. How can I improve intimacy in a current healthy relationship that's been affected by porn in the past? Okay. So the first thing you've got to do is expand what intimacy is, okay? Because a lot of people go, intimacy is sex, but intimacy is everything, mental, emotional, spiritual. There's all types of intimacy, and there's physical intimacy that's not sex. The one thing I really like about what I would call feminine intimacy is that women tend to start with a connection first, and then they celebrate an existing connection in a relationship via sex. Whereas on average, and in general, men tend to do this, but particularly addict men tend to want to create a non-existent connection with sex. So it's like, I don't feel connected to you, let's have sex so we feel connected. So I tend to favor that feminine approach to intimacy. Build an existing connection first, and not in order to have sex. Okay, that's the problem. So build a connection that is just honest to say, I want to feel close to you, I want to feel connected to you, I want to know what you care about, I want to know what's important to you, all those good things. And then the other thing I'd say just briefly is women feel confident to say no, I'm not safe, I'm not comfortable, I'm not okay. You don't have to have sex. That's the first thing. You can't say yes if you can't say no. So you need to be safe enough to say no. And then the other thing I would say is you need to really have an open dialogue about, so a wife could say to a husband, where are you? I want to know if you're in kind of lust mode or not. Guys, you better be brutally honest about that, because she'll know, regardless of what you say, what's real and what's not. The more frequently you're honest, like, it's really attractive to a woman for you to say to her, I'm not feeling connected to you, so I think it would be a bad idea. I think I would be using you right now. Then she's really going to want you to say, because you're really safe. So that's a great place to start. There's lots to talk about, but those are good places to start.
Maybe not immediately, but build something down the road. So don't just take that as a script, guys.
Yeah,
We're gonna get in trouble, Jeff. Adam, it's all your fault, my friend. Okay, we're gonna take a couple audience questions. We've got one back here, and then we'll go up to the front here.
I have two questions. One of them deals with more of, if we have a question right now that we don't feel comfortable sharing, we want to write down, how do we get it up to you guys? I don't really care if there be any.
Okay.
I have one. Oh, go ahead.
Walk it up and read it out loud in front of everyone.
I'll give you a different answer. Just come up afterwards, and we'll give you an email address, and you can email us directly, and we can answer it via email.
Okay, but so I know you're reading questions too. Is there anyone we can get up to then right now?
Yep, you can volunteer. There's
Oh, okay.
two people that have.
We'll give you all of our email addresses, and if you guys have questions, you're more than welcome. If we don't get to your questions, you can just email us directly, and we'll just respond back to you.
Yes.
So.
And then my other question was, going back to the bishop thing. We are talking to our bishop right now, and he doesn't seem to connect to what my wife needs. Like, he'll connect with me, like, it's almost like he's saying, well, if we fix you, then we will fix the relationship. And so I want to know how I can express to him that it's not just me anymore. I mean, it may have started that way, but we need help all around.
Okay, so number one, does your wife have a qualified therapist? Okay, that's where I would start. I would start with therapy, and then second, and this is a kind of LDS focused question and answer, and that's okay. That's why we have a stake president. If a connection is not happening with the bishop, and it's built in, not everybody's going to connect with every single bishop, and that's okay. If that isn't happening, if it's not connecting the way you need it to, you're not getting that spiritual guidance or caring, and you move it up a notch and you visit with the stake president and let the bishop know, hey, I'm going to be visiting with the stake president because for some reason, I don't feel like my needs are getting met here. And that can be an opportunity for growth. It's a hard conversation to have, but it's a very necessary conversation. This is real pain that wives are experiencing, and we have to have real conversations about what's really going on in order to begin meeting those needs. So my first answer would be let the bishop know that this is kind of what you're considering doing, and then seek your stake president out. And that's why that process is in place. Okay, we've got one right here.
I wish that they gave counseling to bishops before they become bishops, because they're not perfect. But my question is, we live in a bedroom community, 3 different little communities, and there is not a sexual addiction program in that area. And people tend to be in other people's business a lot, and I think maybe that's why they're afraid to come out. But all we have available in that area is AA. Is that type of a program going to work for sexual addiction?
Okay, so the way I like to think of how 12-step programs work with treatment programs, I had a dear friend of mine who had cancer, and they went to the hospital and received treatment for that cancer from qualified professionals. They also, each week, would go to cancer support group, as did their family members. Many of you who have been down that road with family or friends know about what I'm talking about. Recovering from this is the same way. You've got to have qualified professionals, and you've got to have support. And that's how a treatment program such as Addo Recovery, Candeo, or Lifestar, or a lot of these booths that were out here today, like SA Lifeline, Addiction Recovery Program for the LDS Church, or Alcoholics Anonymous, Sexaholics Anonymous, and so forth. If you cannot get to a treatment provider in your community, then I encourage you to seek one out online, or, and I'm in St. George, and so we kind of have that same thing where it's a small town type of feel, and people are afraid to come out of hiding. And I have people drive for 2 or 3 hours to go and to come in and see me because of that, because that anonymity and safety is so critical. People don't get well unless they feel safe. And one of the primary factors that create safety is what we call confidentiality, not secrecy. Secrecy is we take it in the dark and never intend on bringing it to the light. A confidentiality where we work through it and we intend on bringing it to the light to the appropriate places, not in neighbors' gossip circles or things like that. So those are 2 areas that I would encourage you to online and then out of town resources that I would encourage you to consider. Okay, another audience question. Okay, we've got one right here with a gray hat, right?
Okay, this is in response to something Adam said, but if anyone wants to answer it, I'm fine with that.
I already was told I'm taking it, so here we go.
Okay, all right. Well, so a minute ago when you said when your wife gives you this golden nugget of do this, then just do it. And so what I typically do is I ignore whatever I feel about that and do it, and then I don't address it later. I do sort of a perfectionist thing, and obviously that's not a great mode of just doing it. So you have sort of some counsel on that, how to navigate that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's 2 ways to approach following recommendations from your spouse. There is the sort of a trusting way, and that is, I'm going to trust that this is what your need is right now, and this is going to help you feel safe, and I'm going to willingly do this as a way to create safety so that you know that I'm committed to your healing. The other way is to do maybe what you're talking about, and that is to say, I'm going to resent you for this, but I'm going to do it anyway, right? Because Adam said I was supposed to do this, or whatever, right? And so what happens is that resentment builds inside you, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just a slave to my wife's commands, and she just gets to do whatever she wants. And then you get angry, and then what happens is that resentment gives you permission to act out, because you say, things aren't fair, I'm not being treated the way I want, so I get to act out now as a way to balance the ledger between us. So in my opinion, the thing that you get to work on there is 2 things. One, saying, I'm really having a hard time doing this. I'm struggling with what you're asking for, maybe for this reason. However, I want you to feel safe, so in most cases, like I'm saying, I'm going to try to do this the best I can. But the other thing is to then surrender the resentment part of it. So you're going to call your sponsor, you're going to talk to your therapist, you're going to talk to somebody in the group and say, I'm dealing with a lot of resentment toward my wife right now, and I need to surrender this because if I don't, I'm going to be in danger of acting out. So speaking up, but then also managing that surrender.
Okay, I'm going to take a paper question. All right, I'll do this one. Is long-term recovery possible without daily check-ins, accountability with a spouse? No, if you're married. I don't think it's possible. Because, first of all, my question back would be, why would you not do that? You know, why would you hide and not be accountable? That's part of her safety, is knowing. She can only see what she trusts. She only trusts what she sees, rather. She can only, it's almost like, you know, talk is cheap, and it's like in basketball, you know, you don't watch their upper body, you watch their feet, you know, so you know where they're going to move. And in recovery, she can only see she only trusts what she sees you doing. And so if you're kind of working this recovery quietly and not saying anything and not checking in, not letting her know where you're at, then in a lot of ways, that's a form of secrecy and hiding. And it leaves her scared. And so you have to turn on those lights. Now, early on in recovery, we're talking like the first, weeks after discovery into the first several months, maybe in the first year. That's going to be more frequent. You're going to need to be checking in on a regular basis and being accountable and letting her know, not only what you're doing, whether you're having any setbacks, but also, how you're feeling, what you're learning, what you're doing. Just opening up, talking about your process, revealing that, letting her see what your process is. And over time, that becomes a natural part of just your conversation. It just becomes a part of like how you talk to each other. And it doesn't feel as formal, even though there are couples who really like the formality of it because they know it's getting talked about. So you have to kind of feel that out with your partner. But yes, you have to have that in your marriage to be doing good recovery. Otherwise, you're just basically living parallel lives.
Jeff, can you take a couple more because we have to leave in a few minutes?
Yeah, I have to catch a plane, so I have a couple more questions I can take. If people have questions specifically for me, and then one in the back, okay.
So I'm working on myself here with this question. I always feel scared when I hear the word accountable. To me, that means in trouble, or I'm employed by a sponsor. I got to do whatever, So could that word be replaced with like support, or like what do you guys? All of you keep saying accountability is so important, and I'm trying to warm up to that idea.
It's a heavy word. Yeah, for sure. It's a heavy word. I should bust out my thesaurus and maybe find you a better word. But I would ask yourself, what's scary about accountability? Like, really, that's the work you need to do, is to figure out why does that word scare you so much?
It scares me so much because I feel like then I'm doing things for other people, not myself.
So one way to start working around that is for you to do some personal work around you learning to own your own story. This is real accountability comes from seeing the effect that your behavior has on yourself and on other people. When you can really understand that, it develops empathy, and then accountability is not scary anymore because you actually want to, like, you care about how somebody feels. If I hurt like a family member and I start to feel guilty, I'm not apologizing to them just because it's the right thing to do. It's because I'm drawn to them to want to repair the broken connection. So accountability really comes out of a place of personal of empathy, compassion, caring about the effect that your behavior has on yourself, but especially others. Does that make sense? And then it's not so scary anymore. It doesn't feel so heavy like you're in trouble, because it's actually moving you naturally toward resolution or connection. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a good question. There was a question in the back.
I hear a lot of discussion, and there are a lot of groups that address husband and wife relationships in this. I'm looking for help as a parent of a child, and it's very difficult to have accountability with your mom,
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out, is there anyone who is there any literature, material, anything I could read, discuss about the dynamics of a mother with a child, or can you address that?
So are you wondering, like, how do you structure an accountability type support relationship with a child as a mother?
Or is there any literature about helping in that dynamic instead of the husband-wife dynamic? Because even in like LDS recovery groups, it's geared mostly to spouse relationships and not, I am sure I'm not the only mom who's dealing with this. And I'm wondering, everything I read, everything I try to find, it is geared to more a spouse relationship.
So are you familiar with the Fortify booklet or online program with Fight the New Drug?
I have learned about that today.
Okay. So they talk about that, and they structure even in their online program, they have a place where you can become the accountability partner. It's really important. If your son, I don't know if you're a single parent or not, or if you have a spouse, but his parents should both be his support. And a lot of boys are maybe initially kind of creeped out talking to their mom about masturbation or pornography. It maybe feels kind of like wrong or whatever. But I just believe that a guy that's going to own his story and be healthy and reduce shame should feel safe eventually talking about this with both his parents. And I think when the mom, especially with her son, is like, well, yeah, I'm going to talk to your dad about that, or not with me, or let's find somebody else. It sends this message that there's something like perverted or dirty or bad about him. He's just misusing his body and his mind to try and manage pain. So this is really about relating to him as someone who's just caught in an unhealthy way of trying to manage his life. And so if you can talk about it from this place, and maybe even share personal examples of times when you've medicated in unhealthy ways by, binge watching Netflix or whatever, or, eating or cleaning. I mean, we all do things as humans to mismanage our emotions. But as far as resources, I would start with Fortify. They have a built-in accountability thing where you can sign up and be that person and help them with their progress. And as you read what they're doing and seeing their progress, you can have those conversations.
And the one key factor is your child has to want that. Otherwise, it'll feel like pulling teeth.
Well, yeah, that too.
One question for you, where you enthusiastical side. What about how do we approach the youth and everything now, not being fearful that a teacher or somebody going to say something that's going to cause a problem versus trying to actually educate, and talk about this more at the younger levels. Like this doesn't get started to because of all this, but it still doesn't seem to be discussed. Or let's go do one big thing and I'm going to talk about it first.
Right. We have to approach this problem in our church communities the same way we do in families. Instead of having one big lecture, like, the birds and the bees talk, where you think you're going to have one big discussion, shut the book, and everybody's going to be sexually healthy. That's how parents did it for generations, and even some congregations do it that way. This is about a long conversation in small amounts. So it doesn't feel like this big shameful event, this big scary thing. I love Kristen Jensen's book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. It's a great method for teaching about this, even for small children. So having this being woven into the discussions, and it's just something that, is, as you train teachers and parents to talk about this, they need to be so comfortable with it that they're not feeling like they're going to corrupt kids if they talk about it. Like, that's their own shame. They need to be able to talk about it from a place of, this is a really healthy thing that humans do when they are bonded and committed to each other. And this is something that has been hijacked by the larger culture, and all of us are going to be affected by it. So here, how do we deal with it? How do we talk about it? And really celebrate sexual intimacy from a sex-positive, healthy way, instead of it being this thing that we have to all gear up to talk about. It should be woven in the fabric of all of our conversations, because it's a part of who we are as humans. Does that help?
You have time for one more question.
Okay, one more. I need to make it back for dinner tonight, so.
Right there in the red shirt. Go ahead and stand
Yeah.
up, nice and loud. And you've got a youth shirt on, good job.
Yeah.
I can't take your question.
If you had a short list of do's and don'ts for either an ecclesiastical leader or a parent, how to approach or help somebody with this problem, what would that be? What would your short
Like if you know they have a problem?
Yeah, or if you're working with somebody as an ecclesiastical leader, or if you're a parent of a child, what would you not recommend that we would do as a parent or as an ecclesiastical leader, or maybe a short list of do's and don'ts?
Well, the biggest thing is don't lecture them and don't talk down. Like it's critical to do this in such an affirming, loving way to really build them up as somebody who's willing to have this conversation with you. If you understand shame, the reflex for shame is to hide. It's to duck away, to minimize, to get away from it as quickly as possible. So if you're in a relationship with somebody who has an addiction or you know they're struggling, the message has to be clear. I love you, you're important to me, and I'm so glad we're talking about this. And I'm also a fellow traveler, and I have to work on managing my body and my emotions and my impulses too, and we're in this together. It's not this thing of like, well, you're so dirty and bad because you struggle with this nasty thing that we don't want to have to talk about, and I actually have no impulses at all in my body, ever. I mean, that's just so ridiculous. And so we have to be humans. We have to talk about it on a level playing field. But if we're in a place where we're a little bit on higher ground, we're a little more stable, we're maybe not stuck in some addiction, we can talk about it with them from a place of, I care about you struggling, let me get as close as I can to you and let you know that you're not alone. And together we'll figure out how to get out of this. I mean, that's the message. It cannot be this one-up thing. If it goes like that, the person's going to go into hiding and it's game over. And I wouldn't blame them, actually, for wanting to hide from that.
Thank you.
Michael McLean's "You're Not Alone" song just went through my
Oh boy. Didn't see that coming.
Hey,
Okay.
I just want to, let's just give Geoff Steurer a round of applause. He's been so wonderful. Jeff is going to take these additional paper questions, and we're going to, if you have a piece of paper, I want you to write this address down. lifestarstgeorge.com/blog. And what we will do with some of these questions that were not answered that were written, we will answer those questions there. So I'm going to repeat that address, lifestarstgeorge.com/blog. And it's STGEORGE. Saint is not spelled out, it's the abbreviation. So lifestarstgeorge.com/blog.
So I'll just do a blog post in the next week or two, and I'll just try and answer as many of these questions as I can. It may be a video, it may be just written down, but please look for that if you want to check back and see if your question got answered. But I'll do my best to try and get them all answered.
Thank you for your time, Jeff. Okay, I'm going to answer a question. Okay, this is a question that I get asked a lot, and I'm so glad whoever asked this question, thank you. Is an addict always an addict? Will there ever be a time when you don't need counseling, checking in, 12-step groups? My answer to that is, it's kind of a difficult spot because here in our presentations today, we use the label an addict, and I hate using labels. Out of ease of teaching and so forth, I do it. But, the side effect of that is people believing or, sensing, oh, this is always going to be me. This is going to be who I am. And while there are certain lifestyle changes that encourage and sustain freedom from this addiction that are going to be lifelong, but what is not lifelong is continually acting out. For anybody who in this audience right now who has any doubt that people can be free of this addiction, I want you to know unequivocally, you can be free. There is hope, and 100% of the people that do the work will receive that reward. I can't tell, like Elder Holland was so eloquent today when he talked about how hope is something that people just don't have. I've worked with so many individuals who don't have that hope. I want you to know there is hope and there is freedom. You do have to pay the price, and the price is a sweet price to pay. The lifelong changes are surrounded around how I connect. Something I failed to mention in my earlier session, pornography addiction is not about sex. It's about pain mismanagement. when individuals that start recovery learn to manage pain in healthy ways, it looks like a bumpy dirt road, but eventually it turns into a cement pavement road, then 2 lanes, and then 4 lanes, and then 8 lanes. Remember the rule in the brain: functionalism equals structuralism. What we do creates structure in the brain. It is bumpy at first. This is a question from someone that's experiencing the bumps of that road, but I want you to know that it gets better. I promise you. If you do the work, you will receive that reward. When you have what's real, the counterfeit doesn't stand a chance. When you learn to consistently get it in a real way, I'm not talking sex in a real way, I'm talking about connection and pain management in a real way. So thank you, whoever asked this question, I'm so thankful. So, okay, we'll go ahead and do a audience question, and Adam Moore will take that. You've got it right here in the purple.
I hope this question is relevant, but I think you're both dads, so. It seems like addiction often is a problem that spans generations and families. So my husband and I were wondering, after being here today, if you could give us some examples of specific language you might use with your child when they make a mistake, and what you could say to them to avoid shaming them, like trying to avoid shaming our children.
That's my forte, specific language, thank you. All right. And we're talking about making like any mistake at all in life, just general mistakes.
I mean, just like,
Yeah.
you know, I have a 3-year-old who like steps on his sister and
That's right.
bangs on her head.
That's not a mistake, that's intentional. So you know.
So like, I don't want him to feel like he's a bad person for doing that, but obviously it's not.
There's lots of different ways. Yeah, great question. I'll maybe try to span a number of age ranges. One way you can do it is talk about your own life experiences, like Geoff was talking about earlier. You can say, I have been there before. I have done that exact same thing that you're doing right now, and I have stepped on your father's toes. No, I have done it before. I have done that, and at the time, I didn't know what I was thinking. I was really hurting, and I was in pain, and I didn't know how to get that across. Now, this is not to a 3-year-old, right? This is maybe to a 7 or 8-year-old. But you would say, I know what that's like. Let me help you understand what I've learned about how to express anger that works better for me. Okay, so that's a way of drawing them into you, into your experience. Teenagers are terrified that all is lost when they make a mistake and they do something wrong. It's like, oh no, I did that thing everyone's been talking about not to do, and then I did it, and that must mean I am a bad person. First of all, if they come to you and they tell you, good job, parents, because that means you did something very right because they trust you. So I would start off, now Geoff has an amazing series on YouTube called the 5 C's that you can look at that I really, really like about how to respond to children. So that would be the extended answer. So you could say something like, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for coming and telling me that you made this mistake. Now how about you found it and they didn't tell you, right? You can say, I am so glad I found this, because if not, you would have been all alone in this, and I'm glad you're not alone now. Start with that. And then you can say, you know what, I bet you can predict their emotions. I bet right now you're feeling like the worst person ever. I bet you're feeling like you're just absolute junk. Because I've felt that before too. And I want you to know that I love you deeply. You might have a hard time believing that, and sometimes kids do. And so you're predicting their thoughts again too. So they're like, wow, they know everything I'm thinking. I bet you're having a hard time believing I actually love you, even though you made a mistake. It may take a while for you to buy into this fact that I do love you, but guess what? I'm going to stick with you, and we're going to keep working on this every day. I am not giving up on you. If you share that with a child, they're going to be like, I've got 20 more things I need to tell you. now I know you're safe. So anyway, 5 C's, check that out from Geoff's YouTube videos.
And one more thing I want to add there, is that okay, Adam? You did a great job. This is just something that I teach parents. It's just human relations. I call it the 1-2 combo. Validate that what they're feeling is okay. That's the most non-shaming thing you can do, is just validate what they're feeling. So validate, relate. That's the 1-2 combo that you can do to create safety in a relationship again and again and again with kids, with friends. Validate that it's a human experience. Sometimes with kids, even if you have to make up a story when you hit your brother, And what happened to you, and you know, kids love stories, and they need to know that they're okay. So really good question, thank you. Okay, we've got a question right here.
So how do you validate little kids? 4-year-olds? How do you validate when they're throwing a tantrum? How do you do that?
Okay, so I have 4 kids from 14 to 5, or excuse me, should be 14 and shortly, 13 to 5, and you're almost like sharing your brain with them when you're validating them by simply saying, you're mad because I had to take your toy away. That's a validation, that they're mad. You're just stating, obviously, what they're feeling. Like they're mad, they're tantruming. You're really mad. And this is so sad. I'm so sad that you made this choice to, you know, hit your brother with your transformer, and now your transformer's been taken away, or whatever it is. And obviously with little ones like that, it's just a simple statement like that. And you know, what you don't do is you don't give the toy back to them, but it's okay for you to validate that they're mad and sad, and just say, I'm going to love you and comfort you, and you don't need to withdraw your comfort from that. Like a lot of people withdraw their comfort, but that's when they need it the most. So does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. Okay, another right here in the pink, red, orange, I don't know.
Yeah, what color is that? Can you help us out?
Red with some tan.
Okay.
Some kind of pinkish, I guess. It's kind of a long question.
Okay.
So when you get, as a wife of an addict, going through the betrayal trauma, and finally getting to a place where, you know, the boundaries click, the keeping myself safe clicks with me, and holding and sticking and like putting in place and holding boundaries, holding to him, and you know, freaks him out, and he's suddenly like losing control and doesn't know how to act, and not in a place where we can get the right, you know, just where we live, not getting what we need as far as therapy and counseling and things like that. And after so much emotional abuse, manipulation, and lies, how do I stick with keeping myself safe, but still showing that love and compassion when I almost don't feel like there's trust anymore in that.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to try to remember all of that. I'll do my best. And it relates to a question that's up here, and that is what happens when a wife starts burning out? You know, her compassion and resources are starting to run out. You know, you've experienced all of this pain, all of these difficult things. It is so hard to re-engage the trust part. And you may have even over-trusted many, many times and got burned for it, so it's really hard to do that. But congratulations, seriously, when you start sticking your boundaries, that's cool. That means you've done some really good personal work, because the struggle that women experience with setting boundaries is they think, I don't want to be mean, and I don't want to, you know, I don't want to hurt him and all that stuff. When you start sticking to your boundaries, then you're communicating something really powerful, and that is, guess what, I'm really important. You're lucky to be with me, and if you want me to stick around, you're going to have to keep paying attention to my needs, and that's not a manipulation, that's just you validating your own worth. He's going to flip out, and you know, he's not going to like those boundaries. He's going to say, you're controlling me. That's the most common phrase. Like, I don't like your boundaries because your boundaries control me. And if you're in my presentation earlier, that's control motivation, right? I would just reflect that back and say, it's so hard for you. It is so difficult for you to accept influence from other people, isn't it? Because that's a true statement. He's not going to say, no, it's not hard for me, because then you'd have to accept influence, right? So he'll say, you have to agree with that statement. Now you've got someone who you're collaborating with. It's so hard for you. Yeah, it actually is hard for me. And then I would say, cool, let's talk about that. When did you learn that you couldn't accept influence from other people? Where did you learn that you had to be your own person and you couldn't be working on stuff with other people, that other people didn't have ideas that couldn't help you out? Where did you learn that from? You've taken something where there's a lot of anger and rage and resentment, and you've turned it into a learning experience. That's how you can provide support without throwing yourself in again to get hurt. You're just reflecting back like, wow, look at what's happening with you. Where's that coming from? So I think that's a good starting point. And then the statement I would make really clearly is, I want to invest emotionally with you. I'm not ready yet, not because I don't like you, not because I'm trying to hurt you, but because I'm still scared. What I need from you is a consistent recovery routine that I can believe in. And when that happens, you watch, I'll start to invest again.
Okay. Another audience question. Okay, right here. And then we'll go with the lady. She's been holding her hand up so high in the back. And we're going to go from here. She's like shocked that I actually...
We see you.
We are going to get to you, I promise. So Brian, right after this gentleman, to the lady who almost fainted in the back. Okay.
I apologize for taking me. So we were in a session this morning, and there was a video. It was a great session. I loved it. There was one thing that I had a hard time believing, where there was a video where they were asking kids when the first time they were exposed to pornography was, and a lot of them were saying like 12, 13, 14. I thought, there's no way. I was exposed when I was 8 years old, and we have a daughter now who's coming up on 1 year old, and so we've obviously been talking a lot about, okay, well, when do we talk to her? Because in my mind, we want to be first before the world talks to her, before her friends at school talk to her. You know what I mean? So I was just wondering if you had any input on that. When do we want to be first, and how early do we want to do that?
Yes, I have a lot of resources for you. Please get a pencil and paper. So number one is start teaching your children a healthy anatomy. There's a very age appropriate. Are you LDS? Go. Do you have it on your iPhone? You don't have an Android, do you?
Are you a youth fan also?
How did you know I was going to ask that again? That affects the way I answer this question. Okay, so you get on your Gospel Library app and go down to the family proclamation symbol. Click on that and then go down to a parent's guide. Please, this is the most underused manual ever. It's a treasure trove.